Welcome to our first session of our small group series, Built on the Rock. If you're gathered together with your small group and watching this video introduction to Lesson 1 and you haven't yet watched the general introduction to the whole series, I'd like to encourage you to watch that video right now. There, I'll assume you watched the intro video. I'm sure each of you would say that your own personal health is important to you, right? In fact, I'm even confident that you would say that the health of all of the people gathered in your small group is very important to you. Then, as a church, the health of all of our people together should be just as important to us. But what does it take to be a healthy church? We'll get to that in a moment. First, let's ask another question, a tougher question. What does an unhealthy church look like? Now, you're going to have the chance to discuss this question in a few minutes, but first, let's start with a few observations. Just like I alluded to in the intro video, an unhealthy church might look great on the outside, but be very conflicted on the inside. Perhaps you were a part of a church that worked very hard to look polished and refined on the outside, only to discover that the people were bitterly divided and really didn't like each other that much. Maybe you witnessed a church leader whose sin was concealed and later became public. And the church fractured over it because they just didn't know how to handle it. Maybe someone in the church has offended you. And the pain of that encounter lingers to this day. Ted Kober wrote his book, Built on the Rock, after he recognized these unhealthy trends in the churches that he worked with. Ted is the senior ambassador for a group called Ambassadors for Reconciliation. It's his job to go into unhealthy churches and help them work through their troubles. In the process, Ted became troubled with the depth of dysfunction that he found in these churches. How could people who have received so much grace from God through Jesus treat one another so poorly? As Ted worked with these churches, he identified similar fault lines that cut through all of the troubled churches, regardless of size or style or even culture. He wrote his book, Built on the Rock, to assist churches to identify the root cause of the dysfunction and to be proactive in being the healthy churches that God desires. So, what is the root cause of the dysfunction? Well, sin, of course. But Ted found something very interesting, one factor that held true in every case of an unhealthy church. Churches that spent more time studying God's word together were able to withstand the challenges that they faced because they followed the direction of God's words. These churches weathered the storm and remained healthy. They were built on the rock. Churches who spent little or no time studying God's word were much more likely to try to resolve their conflicts using the ways of the world. These churches would enter a spiral of unhealthy behavior that often led to heartache and even ruin. It's no wonder Ted entitled his book, Built on the Rock. Over the next few weeks, we'll see what it takes to be a healthy church straight from God's word. Today, I want to encourage you to open up about your unhealthy church experiences. Pain from church conflict can run deep, so I understand if this is difficult for you. I want to encourage you to listen to each other and not to judge. Then, we'll crack open God's word and see what God says about how important it is to be a healthy church and how it works. Don't leave today without praying for each other. We need each other, and prayer has to be at the center of that. In fact, I'll be praying for you right here to have a great Spirit-filled discussion.